At my wedding reception, my side of the hall was empty. Everyone was at my sister's baby shower. As the music played, my dad's name kept flashing on my phone. 51 missed calls in one word. Urgent. I looked around the room, trying to steady my breath. The reception hall was beautiful. Candles lit the tables. The delicate hum of chatter and clinking glasses filled the air. But the silence on my side was deafening. On Mark's side, the room buzzed with laughter, his family filling every corner, clapping, cheering, dancing. My side, 6 people, and that's counting 2 of my college friends who barely knew anyone else. I swallowed hard, forcing a smile. This was supposed to be my day, the day I had dreamed of since I was little, the day that was supposed to make up for all the times I had been overlooked. But today it felt like the same old story, the same old empty promises. I glanced at my phone again. 51 missed calls. Not a single one from anyone sitting in those chairs meant for my family. My stomach twisted. They'd known when the wedding was. 6 months in advance, I'd sent out the invites, even though I was used to hearing excuses. Mom's busy. Heather's got this event. Kyle's in school. The usual. And yet, when it counted, they still couldn't show up. I tried not to think about it. It wasn't just the empty chairs. It wasn't just the fact that my family couldn't bother to be present for me. It was everything. Growing up, I was always in the background. Heather was the golden child, the one everyone loved, the one who got the attention, the one who didn't have to try. I never hated her for it, but I always wished I had just a fraction of the recognition. And now, on my wedding day, when I was supposed to be the center of attention, it felt like I was invisible all over again. I could almost hear my mom's voice in my head, trying to justify it all. It's not about you, honey. Heather's going through something right now. It always came back to Heather. Mark squeezed my hand, his warm smile offering a lifeline. He had been by my side through it all, through the years of being second place, through the broken promises, and the moments when I felt like nothing I did could ever be enough. But today he was here with me, the one person who hadn't let me down. He didn't see the empty seats, he just saw me. But still, the pit in my stomach wouldn't go away. I couldn't help but wonder, how long would it be before I gave up trying to make them care? How long would it take before I finally realized that I'd always be the invisible one in the family? I turned away from Mark for a moment, my eyes scanning the crowd again. My mother's text had popped up earlier, a casual note about Heather's baby shower and how great everything was going. Just a quick brunch, she had said. I'd almost wanted to scream at her. A quick brunch. That was the lie she told herself so she could feel better about missing my wedding. Mark's voice brought me back to the present. Hey, he said softly, maybe it's just bad timing, you know. They'll make it. He rubbed my shoulder, trying to ease the tension in my neck. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But deep down I knew better. This wasn't about timing. This was about something much deeper. I forced myself to smile at him, nodding as if everything was fine. But inside it felt like everything was falling apart. I stood there for a moment, trying to hold back the tide of emotions threatening to break through. The music played on soft and light. But it felt distant, like it wasn't meant for me. The laughter and chatter from Mark's side of the room contrasted sharply with the silence on mine. I didn't want to look at it, but I had to. The empty chairs stood as a testament to everything I had hoped for but never received. I forced myself to look away, glancing at the cake-cutting ceremony happening on Mark's side. Zoe, his cousin, was laughing as she held up her phone, taking pictures of Mark and me with exaggerated enthusiasm. He smiled, that easy, untroubled smile he always wore when his family was around, the kind of smile that made everything feel just right, even when nothing else was. But no matter how many pictures they took or how loud the laughter got, the empty space in my heart only grew. My phone buzzed again, pulling my attention back. Another text from my mom. I opened it without thinking. How are you, sweetie? Just wanted to check in. It was too casual, too disconnected. I knew what she was really saying without even having to read between the lines. She didn't care. Not enough to be here. Not enough to show up. I quickly swiped it away and shoved the phone back in my pocket. Mark was still talking to his family, laughing along with them, but I barely heard him. My mind was consumed by what I couldn't escape, the memory of my family's absence. The growing resentment I felt in my chest made it harder to keep a smile on my face. I had been looking forward to this day for so long, hoping that finally, just once, my family would come through. They'd made all the promises. They'd promised they would be there for me, too. They'd promised I wouldn't always be in Heather's shadow. I tried to steady myself, take a deep breath, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to cover up the feeling that I was standing on the edge of something, waiting for the inevitable collapse. I glanced again at my phone, staring at the notification for a moment. 51 missed calls. One message. Urgent. The message was from my dad, the same one I had ignored earlier. My stomach dropped, and for a second I was paralyzed. What was so urgent now? I knew what it would be. The same old thing. Something with Heather. Something that had to be about her. I thought about ignoring it again, but something told me I couldn't. I pulled the phone back out, staring at the screen as if I could will it to stop vibrating. "Hey," Mark said, his voice soft but pulling me back into the moment. I looked at him, meeting his concerned eyes. He took a step closer, standing next to me. "What's going on?" I didn't want to say it, didn't want to admit it, but I had to. "It's just, they're not here," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know if I was talking to him or to myself. "They said they would be, but they're not." Mark reached out, his hand finding mine. He gave it a reassuring squeeze. "You know they love you. They'll come around. Just give them time." Time. Time was something I was out of. I wasn't going to wait around forever for the people who had never given me the time of day. But I didn't say that to him. I couldn't. Mark had always been patient, always willing to give people the benefit of the doubt, even when they didn't deserve it. And for a moment, I wanted to believe him. But the hurt was still there, lingering, a quiet ache I couldn't shake. The DJ switched songs, and the music shifted into something slower, softer. The sound filled the air, cutting through the tension in the room. It was one of the songs I'd picked, and for a brief second, it felt like a small victory, a piece of the day that was still mine. But then my phone buzzed again, and my heart sank. It was my dad. I glanced at Mark, feeling a wave of guilt hit me. "I'll be right back," I said, stepping away before he could protest. I made my way to the side of the room, finding a small corner away from everyone else. I didn't want anyone to see me like this, alone, lost in my thoughts, drowning in the absence that had followed me through my whole life. My family was supposed to be here. They had promised me they would. But there they were, not a single one of them in sight. I stared at the phone again, trying to convince myself I didn't care, trying to convince myself that it didn't matter. But it did. It mattered more than I was willing to admit. The screen lit up as my dad's name flashed once more, and I took a deep breath before answering. "Where have you been?" he snapped. The tone in his voice was the same as always, impatient, dismissive, like I had somehow failed him for not being there when he expected me to. "I'm at my wedding reception," I said flatly. "The one you were invited to." There was a pause on the other end, and I could hear muffled voices in the background. I could almost picture the scene, the hospital, the sterile lights, everyone gathered around Heather like she was the only one who mattered. My stomach twisted. "Heather's in labor," my dad said, as if that was all the explanation I needed. "We're at the hospital now. Your mom's here. You need to come." I felt the air leave my lungs. What? "She's asking for you," he continued. "You need to come now." I clenched my jaw, the words I wanted to say stuck in my throat. "I'm not coming," I said, suddenly calm. "I'm at my wedding reception, Dad. Where were you when I needed you?" "Don't be dramatic," he said, his voice sharp. "It's not a big deal. You can come back after." "No," I said firmly. "I'm not coming back." I heard my mom's voice in the background, muffled, but I could make out enough. "Natalie, please. She needs you." "No, you need me?" I said, my voice growing steadier with each word. "You needed me when you promised you'd be here." I asked you to show up for me once, and you couldn't even do that? There was silence on the other end. Then my dad, quieter this time. You're being selfish. Maybe I was, but at that moment, it didn't matter. I hung up before I could say anything else, the weight of the call pressing on me like an anchor in my chest. I stood there, staring at my phone. The call ended, but the silence felt louder than any noise could. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I felt too numb for that. My hand gripped the phone tightly, as though the tension in my fingers could somehow help me hold it all together. I hadn't expected it to be easy, but I hadn't expected it to hurt this much either. The call with my father had been like every other conversation we'd ever had, distant, emotionally hollow, like I was just another chore on his to-do list. He didn't get it. None of them did. I glanced back at the reception, feeling the weight of the empty seats pressing on me. Mark's side of the room was filled with laughter, with people who genuinely cared about him. My side, though. My side felt like a ghost town. It was hard to avoid the sting. I slipped outside, away from the noise. The cool night air hit me like a shock to my system, sharp and unsettling. The quiet of the parking lot surrounded me, and for a moment, I almost felt like I could breathe again. I leaned against the cold metal of the building, trying to calm the frantic pulse in my chest. But my mind wouldn't stop. It raced with the same thoughts, the same feelings I couldn't shake. How had I gotten here? I was supposed to be happy. It was my wedding day, the day I had always dreamed of. Instead, I was here alone, stuck in this moment that felt like a never-ending loop of disappointment. I closed my eyes for a second, just trying to center myself. I needed to find some peace, even if just for a moment. My phone buzzed again, and this time, I didn't hesitate. I picked it up, even though part of me wanted to throw it against the wall. It was a text from my mother. "How are you, sweetie? Just wanted to check in." I didn't even know what to say. How could she ask me that, after everything? After not being there for me? After Heather's baby shower had taken precedence over my wedding? I wanted to shout at her, to tell her how hurt I was, but I didn't. Instead, I just typed back, "I'm fine." It wasn't true, of course. I wasn't fine. I was so far from fine, I didn't even know where to start. I stared at the screen, watching the 3 little dots appear then disappear. I could almost hear her typing, then deleting whatever she was trying to say. The silence stretched between us, and for a brief moment, I wondered if she even cared enough to say something meaningful. But it didn't matter. I had already known. I'd spent my whole life chasing after a love and validation that would never come from them. They couldn't give me what I needed because they never really saw me. Not truly. The cool air still hung heavy in my lungs, and I stood there in the parking lot, taking it all in. My wedding day had turned into a painful reminder of everything I had never received, and yet I still felt this tiny flicker of hope. A small, stupid part of me that still believed maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for them to show up. But that part of me was fading fast, buried under the weight of every empty chair, every missed call, every message that made it clear I wasn't a priority. I shook my head and closed my eyes. No more. No more waiting for them to show up. No more hoping for a love that would never come. I turned my phone back to silent and tucked it into my pocket. I didn't need it anymore. It wasn't just about today. It was about every day that had led up to this. All the times I had been made to feel like I was never enough, like I was always going to be the filler season of their lives. But today, I wasn't playing that role anymore. I walked back inside, the noise of the reception surrounding me once more. Mark was still there, smiling at me from across the room. For the first time that day, I felt like maybe I could breathe again. Maybe this was what it felt like to let go of the past, to stop looking for validation from the people who would never give it. And just as I reached the dance floor, Mark's smile widened. He saw it in my eyes before I even said a word. "You okay?" he asked, his voice steady, full of understanding. I nodded, the smallest of smiles tugging at the corner of my mouth. "Yeah," I whispered. "I think I am." And for the first time in a long time, it felt like maybe I had finally started to understand what it meant to choose myself. I walked back to Mark, trying to shake off the heaviness that clung to me like the weight of 100 expectations. As soon as I saw his face, that familiar warmth calmed the frantic pulse in my chest. He was standing by the bar, a drink in his hand, looking at me with concern. I didn't need to say anything. He could tell I was still trying to keep it together. "You okay?" he asked, his voice gentle but firm, the kind that only came when he really cared. I nodded, offering a small smile, but it didn't reach my eyes. "Yeah, just a lot to take in, you know." I tried to sound convincing, but even I knew I wasn't fooling anyone. He didn't press. He just reached out and took my hand, his fingers warm against mine. "You don't have to do this alone," he said, his voice low, reassuring. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that the empty chairs, the unanswered calls, and the family who never showed up didn't matter. But they did. They always would. The truth was, my heart wasn't just broken by the absence of my family, it was shattered by the realization that they had never really been there for me when it counted. And no amount of Mark's warmth could fix that. We moved toward the dance floor, where a slower song started playing. Mark pulled me close, his hands resting on my waist, and I let myself relax into him. For a moment the chaos of the reception faded. It was just the two of us, moving together in the middle of the room, surrounded by laughter and clinking glasses, but it felt like we were in our own world. I leaned my head against his shoulder, closing my eyes, trying to block out the rest of the noise. But my mind kept drifting back to the call with my father. I couldn't shake the way he had sounded, dismissive, cold, as if he hadn't just missed his daughter's wedding. It felt like I was being erased all over again, just like when I was a kid. My sister Heather always took center stage, always stole the spotlight, and I was just there to fill the gaps. Nothing ever seemed to change. "Hey, what's going on in that head of yours?" Mark's voice cut through the haze of my thoughts. He pulled away just enough to look me in the eye. "You're miles away." I forced a smile, trying to push the dark thoughts back. Just thinking about how things turned out today. The words tasted bitter in my mouth, but it was the truth. I never thought it would feel like this. Mark didn't say anything for a long moment. Instead, he pulled me back into his arms, and I let myself fall into him. Letting his warmth wash over me, we swayed together, lost in the music, the noise of the reception fading into the background. For the first time today, it felt like maybe, just maybe, I could breathe again. But the silence between us was still heavy, and I knew the truth was lurking just beneath the surface. My family had let me down, and nothing, not even Mark's kindness, could change the fact that they were still the same. They still couldn't see me. Not really. As the song ended, Mark kissed my forehead softly. "You're not alone, Kinsley," he said, his voice so sure. "I'm here, and that's all that matters right now." I nodded against him, feeling the tightness in my chest slowly start to ease. Maybe he was right. Maybe the only thing that mattered was what I had now, what we had. But deep down I knew that the real work, the real healing, wouldn't come from what Mark could give me. It would come from learning how to let go of the past, how to stop chasing the love I would never receive from my family. And that, I realized, was going to take a lot more than just a dance and a few comforting words. The night wore on, and despite the heaviness in my heart, I found myself laughing with Mark's cousins, joining in their silly conversations, and for a fleeting moment, I felt like I was part of something bigger. But as the night came to a close and the last song played, the emptiness of the day started to creep back in. I walked outside to get some air, the cool breeze hitting me like a slap to the face. My phone buzzed again. My stomach twisted when I saw the name on the screen, my dad. I stared at it for a long moment, hesitating, but then I answered. "What?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. His voice came through, sharp and strained. "Where are you?" I clenched my jaw. "I'm at my wedding. Where are you?" There was a brief silence. I could almost hear the shuffle of papers, the background noise of a hospital, the faint beeping of machines. Then my dad spoke, his tone defensive. "Heather's asking for you." I squeezed my eyes shut, feeling the old hurt resurface. "And you couldn't bother to show up for me?" We're at the hospital. You should come. No, I'm done, I said, my voice flat. I'm done being the backup plan, the afterthought. You can't just demand that I drop everything and come running when you never once showed up for me. There was a long pause, and when he spoke again, his voice was cold. You're making this about you. Because it is about me, I snapped. This is my day, Dad. My wedding. And you chose her again. He didn't answer. Instead, I heard the faint sound of him sighing. Then the call ended. I stood there for a long time, the phone still pressed to my ear, but there was nothing left to say. They didn't get it. They never would. I slowly lowered the phone and stared out into the night. Mark had come out to join me, sensing the shift in the air. I didn't need to say anything. He could see it in my eyes. I'm done with them, I whispered, my voice barely audible. Mark didn't need to say anything back. He just took my hand and we stood there together as the world kept spinning around us. The next few days passed in a haze, the aftermath of the wedding still hanging in the air like a weight I couldn't shake. I stayed close to Mark, and for a while, that was enough. It had to be enough. I focused on the warmth of his presence, the way his hand fit perfectly in mine, the comfort he gave me that no one else had ever offered. But still, the quiet ache in my chest wouldn't go away. It wasn't just about the empty chairs anymore. It wasn't just about the wedding day. It was about the years of neglect, the years of feeling invisible, and the realization that I was always going to be the one trying to make them see me, trying to make them care. And no matter what I did, they wouldn't. It was Saturday morning when my mom called. The number flashed on my screen, and for a moment I just stared at it. My first instinct was to ignore it, to leave it unanswered, but something told me I needed to hear what she had to say. It didn't matter, of course. I already knew what the conversation would be. I took a deep breath and answered, "Hello," I said, my voice tight. "Hi, honey." My mom's voice was soft, almost too soft. I knew what was coming. "How are you?" The question sounded so hollow, so detached, as though she were asking about the weather, not her daughter, the one who had just married the love of her life without her family there to witness it. "I'm fine," I replied, my words clipped, not allowing the bitterness I felt to seep through. There was a pause. "I know you're upset," she said finally. "I just want you to understand Heather's situation. It was different. You know how things are." My grip on the phone tightened. "Yeah, I know how things are. Heather always comes first. I get it." "Sweetheart, you don't understand." Her voice wavered, but I could hear the edge of frustration creeping in. "We didn't mean to hurt you." I felt the anger rise in my chest. How many times had I heard that same line? "You didn't mean to hurt me," I echoed bitterly. "But you always do. You always find a way to make it about Heather. You couldn't even show up for me on my wedding day." "That's not fair, Kinsley," she said sharply. "We were there for you in the ways we could be. You're being dramatic about this." "Being dramatic." I felt my voice rise, my heart pounding. "I'm not being dramatic, Mom. I'm telling you the truth. You chose Heather over me. You always do." There was silence on the other end of the line. I waited, my breath shallow, expecting her to say something to justify it, to make it sound like it wasn't her fault, like it wasn't really a choice. But there was nothing, just silence. And then finally she spoke again. "I'm sorry you feel that way. I really am." The words were flat, lifeless. "But you need to understand that we have priorities too." Priorities. It felt like the word stung more than anything else she could have said. I had spent my whole life trying to prove I mattered, and here she was, telling me that I would always be second place, that I would never be the priority. "I'm done," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "I'm done trying to make you see me, done trying to prove my worth to you. I'm done." I didn't wait for her to respond. I hung up before she could say anything more. For a long moment, I just stood there, the phone still in my hand. My heart was racing, my chest tight with the weight of everything I had just said. It wasn't just a conversation, it was a breaking point. I had never told her what I really felt. I had never let myself say the words out loud because I had always hoped, always believed, that somehow maybe Things would change. But now I knew they wouldn't. I slid the phone back into my pocket and let out a shaky breath. There was no going back from this. No more waiting for my family to change. It was up to me now, and it wasn't going to be easy. But in that moment, I knew it was the only way forward. I had to stop letting them dictate my worth. I had to start living for myself. I turned and saw Mark standing in the doorway of the living room, his expression soft but knowing. He had heard everything. He didn't have to ask what had happened. He just crossed the room and wrapped me in his arms, his warmth grounding me, reminding me that I wasn't alone. "You're right," he said quietly. "You don't need them. You never did." I rested my head against his chest, my mind still spinning with the conversation, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a strange sense of relief. The burden of expectation, the weight of trying to be someone I wasn't, was finally starting to lift. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew I wasn't going to keep fighting a battle I couldn't win. And as I stood there in the comfort of Mark's embrace, I finally allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could be enough for me. The following morning, after the storm of emotions that had left me drained, I woke up to the steady warmth of Mark's arm around me. The bed was still, and the soft sunlight slipping through the blinds felt almost like a dream. It was the first time in days I hadn't felt the sharp weight of my family's absence hanging over me, but I knew that feeling wouldn't last forever. I reached over to the nightstand and grabbed my phone, glancing at the screen. I had blocked my parents' numbers, but I couldn't block the feeling that something had shifted in me. That something was different now. The thought of what had happened over the last few days, the conversation with my father, the endless struggle to prove I was worth their time. It all hit me like a wave again. But today was different. I had chosen to stop fighting for them. I had chosen to stop living in their shadows, hoping they would finally show up for me. The phone buzzed again, and I sighed. I picked it up. Another missed call from my father, then a message this time from my mom. It read, "Can we please talk? This isn't how things should be." I swallowed hard, feeling that all too familiar knot in my chest. It was the same line I had heard 100 times, each time with a different variation, a different excuse. But it was always the same thing. They couldn't see me. Not truly. And they didn't want to. I stared at the message for a moment longer, then put the phone down, letting out a slow breath. Mark stirred beside me, his hand sliding over mine. "You okay?" he asked softly, his voice still thick with sleep. I nodded, turning to face him. "Yeah, just thinking." His eyes met mine, and I could tell he could see right through the calm exterior. He always could. "You don't have to deal with this alone, Kinsley," he said, his tone gentle but firm. "You don't have to take on everything by yourself." I wanted to believe him, to really let go of the weight that I had carried for so long. But letting go of my family, truly accepting that I would never get the validation I had always craved, that was something I wasn't sure I could do. "I know," I whispered, trying to find the words. "It's just hard." "I know it is," he said, his thumb brushing gently over my knuckles. "But you don't have to do it on your own." I wanted to say something, to thank him for always being there when I felt like no one else would be, but the truth was, I didn't know how to let go of the hurt. I didn't know how to stop fighting for people who would never see me for who I was. How could I release that part of me, the one who was always trying to earn their love? We lay there for a while, in the silence that was now comfortable. The stillness in the air was somehow a relief. It was the first time in a long while I didn't feel like I was walking on eggshells, waiting for the next disappointment to come crashing down. Mark had already given me something my family never had: the space to breathe without judgment, the ability to be seen for who I truly was, not what they expected me to be. I was finally starting to understand the value of that. A few hours later, I found myself standing in the kitchen, absent-mindedly stirring a cup of coffee, when Mark entered, looking at me with those soft, patient eyes that had seen me through everything. He had been my rock, grounding me when I felt like I was floating in a sea of confusion and heartache. But there was still a part of me that resisted. I could feel it deep down, a stubborn part of me that wanted to keep fighting, to keep hoping that somehow my parents could be the people I needed them to be. But that morning, something inside me shifted. I had to admit it to myself. I couldn't keep waiting for them. I couldn't keep running in circles, trying to prove that I was worth their love. They weren't going to change, and the longer I held on to that hope, the more it would hurt. Mark broke the silence, pulling me from my thoughts. "I know it's hard, but you're not alone," he said, his voice calm but unwavering. "You've got me, and you've got you." I looked up at him, his face full of sincerity. And for the first time in a long time, I really looked at him. I didn't just see the man who loved me, who had been there for me when I felt like I didn't deserve it. I saw someone who truly understood what it meant to put yourself first, to create a life not based on the expectations of others, but on your own terms. I realized in that moment that I had the power to move forward. It wasn't about my family anymore. It was about me, about what I needed, and what I was willing to give myself. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what I'd do without you." "You'll never have to find out," he replied softly, pulling me into a hug. "I'm right here." The weight in my chest lightened, if only a little. Maybe, just maybe, I was ready to let go. Ready to stop trying to be someone I wasn't for people who didn't see me. I didn't need their approval anymore. I had what I needed right here, someone who loved me just as I was. The phone buzzed again. My mom had texted once more. "Can we please talk, Kinsley? This isn't how things should be." I picked up the phone and stared at it for a long moment. I felt the old urge to respond, to explain, to make them understand. But I didn't. I set the phone down and walked back to Mark. "I'm done," I said, looking him in the eyes. "I'm done trying to fix things that were never mine to fix." Mark smiled, his eyes warm with pride. "That's the first step," he said. And for the first time in a long time, I believed him. The days after the phone call with my mother felt like a fog. A heavy, suffocating fog that clouded everything. I had finally taken the step to put my family at arm's length, but in doing so, I realized I had no idea how to navigate the silence that followed. It was like I was caught in between two worlds, the one I had just walked away from, and the one I had to build from scratch. Mark was my anchor through all of it, but even his steady presence couldn't keep the storm inside me from swirling. It wasn't that I didn't know it was the right decision. It was. But the weight of it, the finality of it, was harder to swallow than I expected. One afternoon, as we sat in the quiet of our living room, a text message popped up on my phone. It was from Heather. I froze when I saw her name, my stomach twisting in that familiar way it always did when I was about to confront her. The message was simple, Leaf. "You're seriously acting like we ruined your entire life over one missed event. You're a grown woman crying over chairs. Get over it." I blinked, rereading it, but it didn't change. It still hurt. Her words were cold, dismissive, as if my feelings meant nothing. My hands started to shake, and I felt the anger rise in my chest again. I thought about how I used to run after her approval, how I used to want her to love me, to acknowledge me in the way she did everything else. But not anymore. I wasn't that person. I wasn't going to beg for scraps of affection. I showed Mark the text, and he read it silently before setting the phone down on the coffee table. "She doesn't get it," he said softly, almost as if to himself. "She never will." I looked at him, and something inside me broke. I had spent so long trying to make them see me, trying to make them understand why I was hurt. But it was never going to happen. The truth was, I didn't need them to. I had him, and I had myself, and that was enough. "I know," I said quietly, "but it still hurts." Mark nodded. "I get it. But you've done everything you can. You've given them chances, you've asked for what you needed, and they chose not to show up. Now it's time for you to choose you." The words hit me harder than I expected. Choose you. How many times had I heard those words, but never truly listened? It was always about what they needed, what they wanted, what they expected of me. But I had the right to choose. I had the right to prioritize myself, to stop feeling like I was invisible in my own life. I sat back, letting Mark's words sink in, and for the first time, I felt a shift. It wasn't going to be easy to let go. But it was time. A few hours later, as I was scrolling through my phone, another text popped up, this time from my dad. "You need help. You're really acting like this over some empty chairs." I felt the blood rush to my face, the anger bubbling up inside me again. But then I took a deep breath, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I thought about the years I had spent trying to make them care, trying to force my way into their hearts. But I couldn't do it anymore. Instead of responding, I just blocked his number. Just like that. Blocked. It felt oddly freeing, like lifting a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying. I didn't need to explain myself to them anymore. I didn't need to justify my pain or apologize for how I felt. This was my life, my story, and I was the one who got to write it. Mark looked over as I set the phone down, a soft smile on his face. "You okay?" I nodded, a weight lifting from my chest. "Yeah," I said, my voice steady. "I'm okay, more than okay." Mark reached for my hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "You're going to be just fine, Kinsley. I'm so proud of you." For the first time, I believed him. I didn't need their approval, their validation, or their love to feel whole. I had already been enough. And now, I was finally starting to understand that. Later that evening, as we sat in the kitchen, Mark pouring us both a glass of wine, I felt a sense of calm that I hadn't felt in years. The constant pressure to be someone I wasn't, to live up to expectations that weren't mine, was gone, and in its place was a quiet peace. "I'm glad I have you," I said, my voice full of sincerity. Mark smiled, his eyes soft and knowing. "I'm glad I have you too." The world outside was quiet, the night still and calm. But inside, I was starting to feel the stirrings of something new. It was a feeling of freedom, of knowing that, no matter what came next, I was finally free to live for myself. I didn't need them. I had me, and that was enough, and for the first time, I truly believed it. The day after I blocked my parents' numbers, a strange calm settled over me. I didn't feel the usual heaviness in my chest, the constant ache of trying to make them see me, trying to be what they wanted me to be. For the first time, I felt like I was breathing on my own, without their weight bearing down on me. Mark had taken me out for a walk in the park that morning. The sun was bright, the air crisp, and for the first time in a long time, the world felt open, like there was more ahead of me than the cycle of disappointment I had lived with for years. I walked alongside him, feeling the warmth of his hand in mine, and I realized how much I had been missing out on by trying so hard to fit into a mold that wasn't mine. As we reached a bench by the lake, Mark sat down and pulled me next to him. He didn't say anything, just looked at me with those soft, patient eyes that made me feel safe. For a while, we sat in silence, just watching the ripples on the water. I wanted to say something about how much had changed in the past few days, but the words felt stuck in my throat. Mark broke the silence. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his voice low, gentle. "I know it's been a lot." I turned to him, meeting his gaze. "I don't know," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I feel lighter but also scared that I've made the wrong decision." He squeezed my hand, his thumb brushing against my knuckles. "You didn't make the wrong decision, Kinsley. You finally did what you needed to do. You stopped trying to make them care when they were never going to. And that's not a mistake." I nodded, feeling a knot of emotion rise in my chest. It was hard to admit, even to myself, how much I had been relying on their approval, even though it was clear that they would never be the parents I needed them to be. I had spent so many years hoping they would change, hoping they would see me for who I was, not for who they wanted me to be. But that was over now. I didn't need their validation. I had found something more important, something I had been searching for all my life: acceptance. From myself. "Thank you," I said quietly, my voice thick with emotion. "For being here, for not letting me go through this alone." Mark smiled, his expression soft. "You don't need to thank me. I'm here because I want to be, Kinsley. I'm not going anywhere." The weight of his words, the sincerity in his voice, hit me like a wave. I had always been terrified of being abandoned, of being left behind, and it had made me hold on to anything I thought could fill the void. But Mark wasn't like my family. He wasn't asking me to prove myself to him. He wasn't looking for something from me that I couldn't give. He loved me for who I was, not who I could be. It felt like the last piece of the puzzle finally clicked into place. I didn't need to keep fighting for love that was never going to come from the people who had raised me. I had already found love, the kind of love that wasn't conditional, that didn't require me to be anything other than myself. As we sat there, side by side, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't known in years. The ache in my chest was still there, but it wasn't overwhelming anymore. It was a quiet reminder of everything I had been through, everything I had survived. But now, it wasn't a burden. It was just part of my story. I'm ready for the next chapter. I said the words, feeling right for the first time in a long time. Mark's smile widened, and he pulled me closer, wrapping his arm around me. Me too. That afternoon we made plans to visit the beach. It was spontaneous, but for once, it felt like we were starting fresh. We weren't running from the past, we were walking into the future, side by side, knowing that we could face whatever came our way together. Later that evening, as we unpacked our bags in the hotel room, my phone buzzed again. It was a message from my grandmother. Your wedding was beautiful. The pictures don't lie. Love was present, even if some people weren't. P.S. I left a little something inside for the future you're building. Vi opened the message and there, in the next line, was a picture of a check. $5,000. My heart skipped a beat. It wasn't the money, though that would certainly help with the next phase of our life. It was the note. The simple, heartfelt message from the one person in my family who had truly seen me. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes as I typed back a quick reply, "Thank you, Grandma, I love you." Mark leaned over and kissed the top of my head. "See," he said softly, "you're not alone. You've always had someone in your corner." I smiled, the weight in my chest lighter than it had been in years. I know. And for the first time, I think I'm starting to see that. We spent the rest of the night laughing, talking, and making plans. The future didn't seem so daunting anymore. It felt full of possibilities, full of promise. And the best part was, I didn't have to wait for my family's approval to live it. As I lay next to Mark that night, I closed my eyes and finally allowed myself to rest. I was free. Free from the expectations, free from the hurt. And for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I was supposed to be,